final workshop is part of the advisor theme. And we're going back to Chaz Howe's keynote speech. Is let's hear the business, the entrepreneur's perspective, and pretty much, if you listen to UHY Hacker Young, the growth industry at the moment in the UK is the boutique brewing and distilling industry, and we have representatives here from Bristol's Moor Beer. Strangely, Justin on the TV screen isn't joining us from Bristol, but Milan, where I think he's on a trade mission, taking real ale to the Italians. He is being represented by, just underneath him on the stage, is Justin Rivet, who's sales and marketing czar of Moor Beer. Justin. No, that's not Justin Howes or Justin. That's Chaz Howes, the former CFO from Supergroup, who's here. And Chaz, we learned, has got a bit of and we were hearing you chat with both Justins earlier. You seem to have some insider expertise in this area, so we'll be, hopefully be able to rely on that. Hopefully everyone in the room heard you speak earlier and heard about the super dry experience, but just can you give us a very brief recap and what it taught you about dealing with accountants and what the challenge is for the audience today?
Well, I don't think I can remember exactly what I said, but the broad theme of it is that I wanted an accountant or an advisor or anybody, for that matter, who could fill in the gaps that I had in my knowledge. And when you had a spectrum of responsibilities that I ended up having, I could not cover it off. I couldn't do everything. I was certainly not an expert in everything. There were certain bits that I felt personally comfortable in dealing with, and actually I didn't want an advisor to go anywhere near that because I felt I could do it myself. But it's those areas where, particularly if you're into something that's quite technical, something that involves a very complex language like the legals, that's where I wanted somebody to sit alongside me, hold me by the hand, and basically guide me through it so I didn't make a mess of it. And that's quite a skillful job to do. So you have to bring an expertise in the technical side of it, but you also have to build a relationship with me. You have to get under my skin. You certainly have to get under the skin of the brand. You have to get under the skin of the product and the company, and you have to understand what motivates the CEO, Julian Dunkerton, not Justin Dunkerton, Julian Dunkerton. So it's not just about trying to sell your services to me. It's about making sure that what you are trying to sell to me is something that I actually need, because otherwise you'll get short shift and short change.
Excellent, thanks. Okay, so Justin, in Italy, over the next 45, 50 minutes, it's going to be much more about your company and your needs now. We'll try and sort of surface all we can about the characteristics of the business and your pain points. But say, and once you've told us all about your business and with Justin here, we'll try and establish what the accountants in the audience here, the things they should probably be thinking of to try and help companies like you grow. But before any of us can consider that possibility, can you just tell us a little bit more about Moor Beer and the nature of the business and what you want to achieve with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, my name is Justin Hawk. I'm the owner and the head brewer at Moor Beer. There originally was a business called Moor Beer Company based in Somerset that started in 1996. But it was started by a farmer who really was not a skilled brewer or a skilled businessman. So a combination of producing a poor quality product and not being able to run his business meant it crashed and failed. My wife and I, we'd found out about it and went out to see it with very much rose-tinted glasses, because it's something that I'd always wanted to do, was to own my own brewery, and the Southwest seemed like an attractive place to be. At the time, living outside of London and working as a management consultant, mostly for IT companies, and just wanted to get involved in an industry that I was really passionate about and grow the business that way. So I found out about it, purchased the business with our own capital, and then went around trying to unpick the mess that it was in for a couple of years before we could turn it around and make it successful. So it's been quite a strong period of growth since that time, leading up to a year ago when we acquired our own facility in central Bristol. We really wanted to be back in the heart of a city with a a great vibe to things where people can come and visit us, better transportation links, more space for growth, although we've nearly outgrown that as well. And we're basically really happy there brewing and selling our beer around the world.
Before you go too far, you mentioned something about sort of tidying up the mess. Did you get professional accountancy help at that point? Was that something where you did need someone to come in and hold your hand and help you identify all the messy spots that needed addressing?
Yeah, we did. And to be honest, this is the difference between accountants who have specialists in certain fields and have experience of working with businesses at different stages of growth and development and what their requirements are. So one of the mistakes that we made, I shouldn't say it was a mistake because I think he did us some good at the time, was we carried on with the accountant who was working with the business prior to us acquiring it. So there was some good knowledge of the history, which was useful. However, his specialty was much more farming related and small holdings, and that was really where his knowledge base was. Those were the types of people he was used to working with. And as a result, when we were building the business and growing, the advice that he could offer us, apart from just the simple tactical filling in forms, was very limited. And that certainly led to some lost financial opportunities for us a few years after we started, which is what caused us to try and look for a different accountant. And ultimately, we moved our business. And the strategic advice we get from our accountant now is very valuable to me as we're continuing to evolve and grow quicker and quicker.
Okay, well, I guess we'll hear more about that shortly. What would you say is the USP of More Beer, and what are you seeking to achieve with the business?
We are very much what I would call a sort of a challenger business or a disruptive business. We don't brew traditional beer. We bring a different product to market that was quite foreign for the UK and actually quite a challenge when we introduced it. So one of our USPs is that all of our beer is a term that I've created called unfined. So we don't use a clarifying agent in our beer, which means that it's got the yeast in it, which is the soul of the beer. You can still see it, and that's fine everywhere else in the world. But in the UK, everyone's used to holding up a pint up to the light and looking at it and making sure it's crystal clear. And to achieve that, brewers would typically use isinglass, which is a fish, the guts out of a fish, to clarify the beer, which we thought was a really horrible practice. It basically isolated parts of the market, such as the vegans and vegetarians that didn't want to have fish products in their beer, and it really stripped out a lot of the flavor and the quality and the soul of the beer. So first thing we did is we brought a product to market that had a bit of a marketing challenge. So we had to overcome that by creating a new term called unfined beer and getting the market willing to accept that. Then we've basically moved that on with introducing things like K-conditioned beer and now can-conditioned beer, so you can go and get our cans, which we launched a few weeks ago, and they're actually re-fermented fully in the can, which is a completely unique selling point for us and something that our customers have been asking for quite some time.
Okay, we've got Justin in the room here, and I guess if you're sales and marketing, Justin, one thing we learned from Chaz is you need to get under the skin of the brand. So I don't want to put you on the spot underneath the boss's eye, but can you tell us a little bit more about the brand values and how they work for you in the market as you're going out to market?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest element of what we do at the moment is based around quality, and there's a lot of brand new brewers in the country. There are a lot of new brewers. There are a lot of baby craft brewers. There's now, I believe, 5 years ago there were less than a dozen brewers in the London area. Now there's over 75, and everyone's struggling for the same place in the market. So what More Beer does is we're very, very focused on the quality of our beers. We have this modern real ale concept, which we drive very, very hard, which picks up the difference between traditional real ale and modern craft beer, and brings some new elements into it, including the unfined element. And what we're producing is very, very high quality beers, which aren't as adventurous as some of the craft end of the market. We're not experimenting with fermentation techniques or ingredients the way that some guys are, but we're also giving people a product they can rely on. So every time you buy a pint of More Beer, it'll taste like a More Beer, it'll be of an exceptional quality, and it'll taste like the last pint of the same More Beer you drank, which unfortunately isn't something that a lot of brewers can boast at the moment. So yeah, it's three watchwords of our product at the moment are quality, the modern real ale concept, and lastly the unfined and can or container conditioned element. One of the big challenges we've had as we've developed more beer has been a reticence from some areas of the market to engage with the keg product. And the way we've got around that is we actually produce a keg beer, which is identical in production and content to our traditional cask beers. So if you were so minded, you could take one of our kegs and serve it through a hand pump as a cask beer. So we're coming to the market from a new direction, which is why we've brought about this new modern real ale concept, which talks about the traditional as well as progressive beer.
Thanks. Okay, so Chaz, just what's your initial assessment of Moore? I mean, we haven't gone into things like turnover and stuff, but what do you pick up from the two Justins about the business?
Well, the two things really. Firstly is quality, because I think that's coming through really strong, and tradition. And I just remember my time when I was at Guinness, which is a number of years ago, and we had the strapline, which is basically excellent beer everywhere, because the pint of Guinness that you get would be so varied in all of the different pubs that you used to go into, for a number of reasons, mainly because the landlord didn't look after it properly and because it was a relatively small part of their turnover. But you didn't know what you were going to get when you actually went into the pub. So sometimes you could have a fantastic pint and it would slip down a treat, and other times you'd be wincing because the taste of it was so vile or the gas mixture was wrong or whatever. So you're absolutely right on quality. That is perfect in terms of trying to make that, and that emphasizes the nature of your brand as well. If you cannot deliver services that are the same quality that people can rely on, that they expect and they know what they're going to get and for what they're going to pay, and let's face it, a pint of beer is, it's not massively cheap. It's not, it's getting more and more expensive. You have to deliver at the point of contact with your customer the perfect pour, as I would say. And what was the other thing I said? I can't remember what the other thing I said was.
Quality and tradition.
Oh, and tradition. And I mean, one of the things I was talking about with the Superdry brand is its authenticity and the fact that it's been created from a trade that Julian has done for 30 years or so. So it's got that genuine authenticity to it. And I sense that that's exactly the same with yourselves, where you're taking a modern approach. So you're challenging the current ways of making beer, but you're also harking back to the traditional side of it. And I must admit, I do like real ale, and I'm a little bit of a purist, and I absolutely love the sound of a traditionally brewed beer with the highest of quality. I've already emotionally engaged with it before I've actually tasted it.
Okay, so they've got you at unfined, but let's detach now and as a prospective, FD or external advisor, what are the things you want to find out from Justin?
Well, the unfined I'm not so sure about, if I'm honest. However, I do like to hold my beer up and look through it and see it's crystal clear, because I think, the pipes are clean, etc., etc. So sorry about that, Justins. I guess from my perspective, it's a long time ago since I worked in the alcoholic beverages industry, so I'm looking at you, but you clearly can't see me. It's about what range you've got and what your plans are for that range in order to extend it out to either capture more customers or give people more choice or give people more options when they're actually in the pint. I mean, how are you actually planning your way through that route?
So we've got quite a large range of products that we do. The first would be the different beers that we brew. So we brew over the course of a year probably 25 different beers, some of which are on permanently. So there's a half dozen that we keep constantly available because there's sufficient demand in the market, and that's really what our customers are asking for. And we keep it interesting by introducing either one-offs or seasonals that will sort of rotate through at different points in the year. So from a brand perspective, we can provide quite an offering, but what we do also that's different on the USP side is by having the different package formats that they can get our beer. So when we package our beer, we'll do it across a number of formats. So we'll do cask, as Justin was saying, we'll do keg, we'll do our bottles, and then introducing our cans now. So wherever someone wants to have one of our beers, we will have an offering for them, whether they want to go out to the pub where they can get our beer on cask. Perhaps they belong to a social club that can't run the bar 7 days a week, but they might open on the weekends, or they don't have a high turnover. So something like our keg conditioned beer still gives them real ale, but from a keg font, which will extend the lifetime for it and provide different occasions for people to drink our beer. And equally, from a package side, if they wanted something to share because they're going somewhere potentially for fine dining, or they're having very high alcohol beer, or something that's maybe a bit more challenging in its flavor, and they might want to share with a group of friends, we offer a package format for that, as well as our new cans that we've come out with. Again, can conditioned, so they're having a real ale in a can, but they can take it to a festival, they can take it to a beach, they can take it to a friend's house, they can drink it on a train, coming back from work, and basically any occasion that they want to engage with our brand and drink our beer, we're trying to provide an offering for them. And that's around the world, which is why I'm here in Milan today and I'll be in Spain next week.
Sorry to interrupt, but so how do you actually get your distribution? Because you've got it seems like you've got a really wide range of beers and flavors and varieties, and you mix it up depending on the season. But getting distribution in a market that is incredibly complex, fragmented, crowded, how do you cut through all of that in terms of providing that level of quality and service to your customers?
That's probably a better question. I'll let Justin answer on stage.
I get this one. Our route to market is varied. We have key partners around the world who take care of our export products and do a great job of that, which is why Justin's in Milan this week, as he said, Spain next week, and then I think back to Rome the week after. But in the UK, it's a real struggle. A lot of the large wholesalers are set up to deal with the old beer industry. So they expect to have, for instance, Guinness, they have one product, it goes to every pub they deal with, and it's predicated on discount and on price they can offer at the end, and how they deal with the publican. The problem we have is with 25 different products running over a year, it's keeping the fresh beer out to the pubs as quickly as possible, and it's also about knowing your customer. So putting 2 more beers on a list with a large wholesaler doesn't really work for us, because the pubs that take our beer want a rapid turnover of product. They want unique products. They want new products all the time. So we work with a large network of very small local wholesalers who might not take a huge volume from us, but they do it on a regular basis. They know their pubs, and they're very, very good at being a representative for more beer, as well as taking beer to market and doing all the other jobs we expect of a wholesaler. So really our relationships tend to be exclusive by geographical area, and they tend to be with people who are really, really good advocates of our product.
Could I just another
Yep,
question?
Carry on. You keep going until when you run out. I've got a few.
Yeah, okay, good. You've got a quite a wide range, which adds complexity in the marketplace. So how do you, and I sense that there's people out here who are facing the same thing but in a different industry or different sector. How do you make sure that you organise yourselves internally to deal with that complexity? Because that must be quite challenging. And the number of SKUs you've got, the number of customer relationships you've got, the number of different needs that these clients want and require. That just makes a massive spaghetti of relationships inside your organisation. I'd be quite interested just to understand how you deal with that.
It's definitely a challenge. It's a daily challenge that we have to deal with when we come to the daily task of figuring out what we're going to package and which mix we're going to do with it. There's always a discussion that involves the sales side, the warehousing side, see what stock availability we've got, the production side, so we know how much we've got to play with, because we're still quite a growing business. So because of that, it's incredibly difficult to forecast demand, because we can sell everything that we produce and more, which is why we're continually growing. But it's then segmenting things to the tiers of our customers, so who are really strategic customers, distributors that we want to ensure always have stock of certain of our brands, So we maintain regular communication with them so we understand which are the key brands of the 25 that we do that they want to have in stock all the time, which package formats do they want it in, which markets do they need to be in. So does it need to come over to Italy? Does it need to go out to Canada? Does it need to go up to Manchester? And it is very difficult in the stage that we're at. So it involves a lot of players. And to be perfectly honest, as we're still growing, the systems that we have in place to do that are not very efficient. Coming from large organizations previously with the IT systems that they'll have in place, they will certainly be more efficient than the way we are at executing it. But that's the challenge that we have when we're growing, and that's some of the advice that we go to look for when talking to to the accountant and other advisors that we have discussions with. So it's interesting to always hear benchmarks from our own industry as well as other industries and get their view on where we're at in our stage of development and what systems we need to put in place to enable growth. So it's people, it's IT, it's other physical facilities that we need to do in the building.
We got a question from the floor, I think, for you, Justin.
I was just wondering how specifically your accountant was helping you with all that.
Yeah, well, that's the crux of the matter, isn't it? He helps with a number of things. So some very tangible examples. When we were going to him looking to relocate the business, we needed to look for premises, for example. So I'm very much someone who likes to have ownership and control of our assets so that I know what I've got to work with. It's perhaps not the most efficient or rapid way of growing, but I know that we own something and it's not going to be, it's ours for the long term. We can maintain it. So when we were looking for the facility, one of the things he was suggesting was accessing our pension funds and purchasing commercial property through our SIP, which was something that I had never really considered before. So we worked really hard on that project. He lined us up with a SIP provider, did the contracts in place for that, got all the funds transferred, the money's paid out so that we could own it in a much more tax efficient way. So that was one great example. Certainly as we're continuing to grow the business and we do a significant amount of research and development, he said, well, one thing we should be considering was R&D tax credits. And he gave some examples to us about some of the things that we were doing and how, whether or not we realized it, they might be considered R&D because we were creating a new process or a new type of product that either didn't exist in the market or wasn't common knowledge and didn't exist to us. So we were successful in putting together claims for that. So talking to him about how we're growing, developing the business, and he'll just throw out nuggets of information like, did you know we can do a SIP to do the commercial property purchase? Oh no, I didn't realize that. What do you mean? And of course, there's a fee that goes along with the service, but the value he's added to us far exceeds the fees that we pay him. He's also very understanding of businesses in our stage of development, and we structure our fees accordingly. So as we grow, we all kind of grow together.
Sorry, Justin, I've got one more question. You've just changed your accountants, which I thought was quite interesting, and I understand the rationale why, because we did exactly the same thing. But and you've obviously got in your head a very clear vision for what the organisation is trying to achieve. I'd be quite interested to just hear what that vision is, and then what does your accountant need to do differently from now to, say, the next 3, 4, 5 years in order to keep that relationship with you? How can he go along the journey with you? What does he need to do?
Really needs to offer proactive advice. So that means getting together. He sends us regular updates on legislative changes, on things that are going on either in our industry or in other industries. Just little pamphlets that they produce on a quarterly basis. Follows it up, invites us down to seminars to go and hear what other people are doing. And some of these things will just spark, just like the SIP, they'll spark an idea in my head, and it's something that we can then pursue. So we changed accountants, I think it was probably 3 or 4 years ago. And he still stays relevant by staying, first of all, in touch, second of all, being proactive, and third of all, offering strategic advice to ways that we can look at acquiring capital or using our capital that we've got in a more efficient way.
What about commercial advice about, routes to market, new sectors to go into? Is there anything that they can do perhaps in that area which they currently don't do, or they do and you don't utilize, or can they get into the more commercial areas?
Certainly, our accountant's good with networking, so he invites us along to different breakfasts and things that they do. It's not something that I've really taken the opportunity to go along to. The split of the business at the moment is about 60-40 between domestic and international, about 40% international, and that tends to grow year on year as the demand for our beer grows. So he's very good at offering advice and support in the local area. But so far on the international side, I've found it really important to be in market, which is why I'm here this week and will be gone for the next couple of weeks, working with our distributors and understanding what they need. One thing that is going to become, or has become quite paramount, that we need to find some resolution for is the fluctuations in exchange rates. So again, it's not something that I would have really thought of 9 years ago when I restarted the business, but with the euro doing as poorly as it is now, it does have an impact on our sales internationally. At the moment, we do all of our banking in the UK, we do all of our invoices in pounds, so we certainly have regular frank discussions with our distributors over in Europe with the weakness in the euro and how that will limit our ability to grow the market at the rate at which we have been growing, unless we can look at some alternative arrangements. So when I get together with the accountant, when I get back, that's one of the things we're going to be looking at.
I guess as you grow, you're going to want to move further and further into each of your marketplaces. So, like you end up with a distributor at the moment, you could probably see yourself with a sales office or something, and then ultimately you become your own distributor. So to what extent is the partners that you choose now having that capability to support you locally in those international markets? Because you're going to get yourselves into employment law and local VAT and taxes and duties, particularly in the alcoholic beverages industry. To what extent does your advisors now need to have that capability so they can guide you into that growth profile?
They do need to have that capability, either something that they can offer in-house or partners that they work with. You're exactly right. Other advisory services like employment law, international law, certainly currency exchange and different banking systems. The routes that we're looking at for international expansion and some of the discussions that we're having are about potentially creating separate mini production facilities in country to reduce, and partially to reduce some of the costs in transporting heavy liquid from the UK to other parts of the world, but also to add new product lines that are going to be more interesting and relevant to the various markets that we're in. So they'll build upon the core of what we've got, which is modern real ale, but we might want to do a project in Italy where we're looking at some more sort of avant-garde, sour and naturally fermented beers that are appropriate for this market and would be better made in this market, and working with some of the partners that we've got over here. And that would definitely necessitate acquiring facilities here, creating new working relationships, finding new advisors, obviously banking and accounting relationships over here and in country.
Justin, it's John here. When you switched to your current accountant, you gave the impression that he had a bit of experience in the brewing sector already. Is that correct?
No, actually, no. It's much more just working with bigger businesses as opposed to working with much more farming-based landholders.
Okay, I was hoping to find out whether if there was a specialisation that the benefits you might have gained from that, but since they don't exist, what in your view are the kind of the characteristics of the marketing, or the ultimately the what are the KPIs you look at, or have you evolved your view of the business to the point where you have KPIs you can measure?
KPIs are something that I used to use quite a lot as a management consultant and advising other businesses. The stage of growth that we have been at to date have meant that I focus much more of the basics, so much more on the sort of the P&L side, on the turnover side, on the profitability. I'm really keen on looking at the profitability of our various product lines, both domestically and internationally, and analyzing it from that perspective. But there are things that I've been wanting to inquire about, such as staff ratios and other things that don't seem to be widely available. So that's something that I would certainly be looking to my account to see if they could offer.
I probably jumped ahead of myself slightly because I almost maybe should have just gone back. So your drivers are very fundamentally just making more beer and Justin here moving as much of it. That's the fundamental driver of the business and the character.
At the moment, yeah, because we're still virtually in hypergrowth. So at the moment, we just can't produce enough beer. So it doesn't lead to complacency, but it does mean that our focus is much more on production and keeping the brand edgy and in the forefront of people's minds to continue the growth. And I think as we reach some levels of stability, which probably won't be for a good 5 to 10 years, that's when I think we'll need to be looking a lot harder at sort of KPIs and how we maintain and get incremental growth in that stage.
Okay, Chaz has got a question for you, I think. But before he asks, just wanted to absolutely clarify. Did you say you're in a stage of hyper growth? Is that?
Yeah, I would say that's where, not compared to the software industry I used to work in, but compared to the brewing industry, yes. So we doubled capacity less than a year ago. We're looking to double capacity again within the next quarter or so. And I think even that, from the financial projections we put together last week, is not going to be enough. That will necessitate additional sites, additional funding. And that will have to be done in a way that we haven't as a business done in the past. So I can't personally fund this thing forever. So we need to look at alternative access to capital, crowdfunding and things like that. And that's something I will definitely be talking to my accountant about in the next week.
Okay, well, I'll have a question for that, unless that's the one you want to ask him.
No,
okay, but after you then.
My question is, as you take on advisors, you bringing access to greater expertise that you haven't got yourself necessarily. I'd just be interested how you've managed and grown or not, or flexed or not, your finance team to actually dovetail with that. So one, you don't get anything falling through the cracks, and secondly, you don't get duplication.
To be honest, it's not something that we've done at the moment, but I think it's something we're going to need to do in the next 12 months. At a business starting out as a small family business and increasing the headcount organically has meant that we've always been focused on the production side of the business. So the majority of the headcount is on brewing the beer. Justin will certainly be saying and has said that he needs much more of a sales team to continue the growth level that we know we can achieve and that we expect to achieve. So we'll be adding to the sales team. We certainly know on the finance side that we need to be adding to that because the capability that we've got in-house now we're pretty much maxed out on. But equally, we need to be able to fund that.
Well, that's a good point you end on, because that you are in this phase of hyper growth. Everything you've said has been expand for the past sort of 30, 40 minutes. Has your accountant, they must be aware of your longer term plans. Have they broached your funding needs and ways of dealing with them?
That's the meeting that we've got lined up for when I get back.
Did you ask for that, or did the accountant maybe suggest it was time you started exploring the options?
Yeah, he'll feed me little nuggets every time that we get together. He's a great sales guy. Every time we get together, of course, we're not. We have to look at the corporation tax and all the basics and make sure that we've got everything ironed out there. But he'll always throw out something that's interesting to get me back in the office. Like, did you know we can do a SIP? Did you know we can do R&D and whatnot? So it's that proactive nature that we really need. And the previous accountant, we didn't get anything at all from that. I'd have to ask him questions. I'd say, I read about this change to legislation in the news. How does that impact us? And he would say, let me go research. I'm not really sure. And that's not the speed at which we needed to operate.
Okay, now you've called upon the pension fund and got your property acquisition. Is that the property in Bristol now that you're operating from, or is that another
Yes.
facility? Do you have, in your mind, do you sort of have a preferred funding route yet, or are you very open-minded about which option you take, or which of several you might take?
I am open-minded to it because I think we've probably exhausted the level of, or we're near exhausting the level of resource that I would be happy to fund personally. There's always the question of ownership. So right now the company's 100% owned by myself. So I call all the shots. I own all the equipment. I own the building. It also means that we don't have the pressure of external investors demanding certain levels of growth, or that we compromise in the way in which we produce something or become more commercial. And that's been really important to our ethos, and I think our customers appreciate that because that comes through in the brand. But you can't fund this thing forever, so at some point we will need to look at alternative methods of funding.
Okay, now I'm a technology journalist at heart, and I started to get quite interested when you talked about your sort of disparate information environment, your need to try and get a better hold of the information, whether it was on the sales or on the distribution or on your core financials. Again, is that a pain point your accountant has sat you down and explored with you?
He's not sat us down and explored it. I mean, my background, part of my background was in CRM. So I used to work for various IT companies that sort of kicked off the CRM movement back in the 90s. We have a CRM system in-house. We don't use it as effectively or to the best practice that we used to advise the larger companies that we would put CRM systems in. We do have a back office system that integrates with it. However, what we're really missing is some data analysis and some data warehousing. So we've got other than pivot tables, we've got not a lot of great resource there for dissecting data and trying to understand what's actually going on. We've got all the data input in there. It's just really getting people and systems in place that can interpret it, and then we can make some informed decisions about which product lines are doing well, which markets are doing well, which aren't. When we've got some red flags, what do we need to do about it? So those are things that we definitely need to put in place as we grow further.
Who's not having the time to do that kind of analysis at the moment?
Pretty much everyone, but the buck stops here, so yeah. I don't have the chance.
Okay, but so the advisor your accountant hasn't quite sort of maybe spotted that pain point and suggested they could do more for you in that area. Would you welcome that if they suggested that?
It's not really something I thought about outsourcing before. I would be interested in hearing from him if that was the case, what he could offer and what it would cost.
Yeah. And the other $64,000 question is what are the finance systems you're using, and how fit for purpose do you find them? Or sorry, I think you may have answered that one already. But what are the systems, and where would you like to improve them?
So systems we have in place at the moment on the sales and the product side, we've got a system called Brewman, which is a sort of for the microbrewing or craft brewing industry, a kind of an industry standard software package that includes CRM with telesales. It's meant to have some warehousing pieces to it. It's got some reports to it. It integrates back into Sage Line 50, which is the ERP back office system that we've got. We do outsource payroll to our accountant. But those are basically the systems that we've got. So we've got Brewman, which does the sales and the product side. We've got Sage Line 50 for the ERP or the financial side of it. And I think every small business owner, and probably every accountant will say, we'd love to hate Sage. So yeah. If there's no one from Sage in the room, it's not the most user-friendly system.
No, I think there's a lot of people here who'd probably be knocking on your door in the next few weeks to offer you their wares. Well, that's quite an interesting avenue. As I say, I just did a session where I had 2 or 3 accountants on the stage here, which they would have loved to hear that. They would have been suggesting all sorts of reporting packages, analysis packages, probably distribution and like. But bring you back into the conversation. I nearly call you Justin, Chaz. Kind of, we were into the last 15 minutes or so. What kind of advice would you suggest to the, if you were the external advisor here, where would you direct their attention first?
Well, that's potentially a massive question. However, I think you've got to have I'll relate it back to Superdry, and they had a very, very clear vision for where they wanted the business to go, where they wanted it, what they wanted to try and create, and who they wanted to try and emulate. And as you go along that path, you realise and you recognise where you're good and where you're not good. And I sense from the two Justins here that brewing is nailed, frankly. Selling is nailed, frankly. They require some expertise and some input into perhaps some of the more technical areas where it's on the periphery of what they do as a business, but it's absolutely essential for what they do, because if they don't do it, particularly when you're talking about taxes and duties, they'll come a cropper of the law apart from anything else. So, but it's really mapping out that journey and understanding what advisors you need as you go along that journey, because they will change. You've changed your accountants once. I suspect as you get, I'm not sure who it is you've got, but as you get to be a bigger, more international organisation with possibly subsidiaries abroad, you need somebody who can dovetail and match what you're doing in those particular countries. And similarly with your lawyers, exactly the same thing. You're into international law, you're into local law. So having a UK-based lawyer who's an expert in UK law is inappropriate for you at the stage of development. So it's having that vision, understanding what you need, and going out and getting it before you actually get there, or get your advisor to create that skill set for you purposefully, which is probably a slightly harder ask, is perhaps what I would say.
And Justin in Milan, so how do you react to that? Is that something, have you got that mapped out already in your mind, or is it time to sit down with a notebook and...
Yeah, I think that certainly the vision we've got mapped out. The ability to execute internationally and considerations of advice. And I think it's time to, in some ways, as the business evolves, you need to sort of grow up and recognize where you're weak. And I think we recognize where we've got our strengths and where we've got our weaknesses. And when we can hit certain stages of requirement and affordability, then we can start to bring those extra services in. But I think if we don't bring them in and get the advice, then it's also going to limit the growth, or it'll cause us to make some mistakes along the way, which could be more costly than getting the advice in the first place.
Okay, you sound like your current accountant is pretty proactive. Are there one thing Chaz might have mentioned earlier? Do they really get the brand? Have they got an emotional investment in the More Beer brand? Do you sort of feel that connection with them?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So when we had our, our accountant had become a customer.
Whoops. Okay, Justin, get ready. You may be on here.
Beers, gifts, the door for and certainly when we had our opening party, they came along. A couple of them from the office came along to it, and have come back since and continue to become customers and advocates of the brand. So I'm sure, as much as when I meet with him and he recommends other people that I might want to network with, I'm sure he's also taking our beer to other people and saying, "Oh, look, we work with this great brewery, and here's what they've achieved, and chase the beer, it's great."
Right, you're beginning to cut in and out of us slightly, so if you do disappear, Justin here is ready to leap in and pick up things. But it sounds like generally very good things to say about your current accountant. Are there ways you think the relationship could be improved?
The only area that I am concerned about is on the international side, and whether or not they've got the experience in-house to help us internationally as much as we're going to need in the future.
Yeah, so I guess it's their ability to scale up as you do as well. Okay. Yep. And did you have any other thoughts on the advice or ideas Justin's sort of put your way? Anything that you think you might act on? Justin, Chaz.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I do think it's going out and looking at the international and the legal side of it more aggressively than we have been. We've tended to look at legal support in a very reactive way, which is probably a false economy. I think getting some proactive legal support would be helpful.
Okay, I mean, does anyone else in the audience want to put any questions or offer any advice to Yep, we got a question down here in the front row. I'll
Justin, I've been hearing these two gentlemen trying to convince you to change your accountant. I'm not offering my services here. But what I want to ask you, as a growing company, you have compliances in different countries, which is correct. But presumably, as a growing company, you also need an accountant to really help you on your way. Presumably, there are lots of valleys and mountains in the way. How do you square up these two things of yours, these two aims? Presumably, they are both of them are very important, compliance and to grow, for you to grow your business.
Compliance is a given, and without wanting to ever assume too much, my assumption is that at the absolute bare minimum, my accountant will make sure that we are compliant, and he will be creative in ways to help us structure things to best effect for the company, but equally with the ethical purpose that we want to trade with as a company. So of course you read in the news about Starbucks and other large companies who are not paying corporation tax and other shenanigans that go on behind the scenes. We don't want to be part of that. But equally, we pay an excessive amount of tax and beer duty, employment tax, and all the rest. So it's not a bottomless pit. We need to find a balance between absolutely maintain compliance, be creative in ways that can save us money, but still maintain the sort of the core ethics that we want to trade in.
You are this point A, you want to go to point C, and basically that journey, presumably a proactive accountant will only achieve that for you. And yes, I hear your Price Waterhouses and your KPMGs will help you out it, but really someone who is a bit smaller, more proactive, someone who will guide you, presumably that's what you're looking. That presumably is $1 million question.
It's much more of a personal approach, and I used to, one of my previous employers was Arthur Anderson when I was in their business consulting team, and I've got a lot of respect for I'm not even sure how many are left, the Big Six, the Big Four, or whatnot, and what they do. But it's actually, we're a small independent business. We prefer to work with other small independent businesses because we think we get a much more personal touch. Now, whether or not, we have no aspirations to be a multi-billion-dollar brewer. So whether or not we'll ever hit the radar of the PwCs or KPMGs of the world, I'm not sure. But I would first and foremost like to maintain a strong relationship with a strong and personal relationship with a smaller organization, as long as they can provide the proactive service and the support that we need.
Justin, when you did swap your accountants, how did you find your current advisor, and on what basis did you select them? Did you sort of do a beauty parade or any kind of, competitive pitch or assessment?
No, we didn't really. I was passed along some information, these quarterly leaflets that they send out, and was invited to some seminars from them. One of which caught my eye about grant funding, regional grants that were available. It was something that my previous accountant had no real ability to help us with, so I went along to one of the seminars and started talking to them. And that sort of opened up the conversation of our accountant who we were working with, fee structures we were paying, the value that we were getting out of them. And it was even during the first meeting where he said, well, look, we've had a look at what your accountant's done for you. He's missed A, B, and C. So this has really cost you this much money already. It was something I hadn't really considered before. And then he started coming out with different ideas about R&D and SIPs and whatnot. So it made the decision to change easy from a management perspective, a little bit difficult from the personal perspective because we had worked with our previous accountant personally for a few years, and you never want to give someone the bad news. But it's better for us. It's better for the company to move along to someone who can help us grow faster. And our previous accountant appreciated as well that we probably outgrown his ability to provide a good service to us.
Okay, and again for the sort of, we're nearing the end, so this is possibly the last call for questions for Justin or Chaz or Justin. So Justin, Well, what we've heard several of the good things that your current accountant does do. What other advice? Again, you can probably see them. There's about sort of 40 or 50 people in the room here. Accountants, small business accountants generally, who probably would love to advise a firm like yours and to sort of be part of that adventure. What other things do you think? What's the best things you think they could do to be the kind of proactive advisor you want?
It's staying in regular touch. It's keeping in tune with what's going on with legislative changes, with what's going on in the media, with what's going on with business and the changing requirements, and keeping an eye on us as a business as we grow and realizing, we're entering a new product line or we're entering a new market. So we considered A, B, and C. Hopefully we have. A lot of times we haven't. And if someone comes to me and offers some value, and I see that there's some value in it, then it gets the wheels turning, and you start thinking, okay, well, maybe this is someone that you want to work with.
Okay, and I guess just to wind up, Chaz, we've heard some great things. I think you've identified some of the risk factors surrounding the hypergrowth that More Beer is experiencing. And you kind of offered the advice to Justin about that. But if we turn to the audience here, what are the other, are there other elements of business? I mean, we never did actually ask them, the turnover and kind of margins and things. But maybe, could you suggest to the audience the factors you might, if they were dealing like a business or encountering a business like More Beer, what would be the factors and points you'd kind of make sure they highlight? Is it just get to know the brand and just get right inside the business, or are there other things as external advisors they could do really to provide you the kind of business you run and the kind of business Justin runs?
Well, there is a Julian in here. Well, I'll answer that from my own personal perspective, because Justin, you've obviously got a passion for your brand, you've got a passion for your business, and the other Justin as well. Everything you're doing, you're trying to do, and I think I can quote you, is, you want everything you do is to try and sell more beer. Yeah, and that's exactly what Julian Dunkerton did about creating the brand and trying to sell more product. It's as simple as that. And the thing that they always forget is building the infrastructure inside your organization, because if you don't do that, you end up with this envelope of a business that starts to blow up. And if you've got no infrastructure to support that balloon as it grows, it will implode on you. And you will get yourself into one hell of a mess. And it's a big mess to try and create, or to try and get your way out of. And we had 3 occasions where it affected us, mainly to do with IT systems, which had an impact on stock, which had an impact on Christmas. And we ended up with wrong sizes, wrong places, wrong colour. It was absolutely awful. And our share price went from about 15 quid down to £2.50. Which is not good news when you're an investor. So from your perspectives, I think as advisors, is to prick their conscience to make sure that they are building their infrastructure, that they have got the controls in place on their business. Justin, you use the words, I like to be in control of everything that I own, or vice versa, you like to own everything that you control. But don't forget your investment in IT, don't forget your investment in logistics infrastructure. Don't forget your investment in people, particularly the finance team, if I'm honest. And I just think you guys in the audience here, absolutely, totally well placed to be able to advise and guide and shape what they do with their organisation, because that's what you do with everybody else that you deal with.
Okay, well, that's wound everything up. That's a useful bit of advice and good practical, whether you're a businessman or an entrepreneur or an accountant advisor. Thank you very much for taking a break from your Italian distributors. We really appreciate what you've done, and just getting a look inside the business has been brilliant from both Justins. And Chaz is questioning. We're playing name roulette this afternoon. It's been a long day. So, ladies and gentlemen, could you? We have to hide the microphone so we don't ruin his hearing in Milan. But could you thank our panelists, please?